Dear beautiful souls, today I would like to speak about a topic of great significance that is kind of hidden under the stream of the current events. Recently, well, if I say recently, I mean the last decade, a lot of information has surfaced about previous civilizations that existed before the great floods on the planet Earth. Civilizations on planet Earth have been wiped several times. And now many seek in the discovery of ancient ruins, the discovery of ancient civilizations, answers to the mystery of these catastrophes. Well, the greatest catastrophe that is deeply embedded in the collective soul memory of mankind is the fall of Atlantis. Why is this significant right now? Well, interestingly, a lot of people have brought up on the internet the fall of Rome. Why was the fall of Rome brought up? Well, simply because this is a part of written history that as a collective we remember more directly. But the difficulty is that the majority of people do not remember their past lives, therefore they can only draw information from what is written down and handed down. Thankfully, many of the great ancient traditions like the Egyptian tradition, the Atlantean tradition, Inca traditions, Maya traditions, a lot of their true knowledge has been lost over the ages but will be rediscovered while the Earth goes through the energetic ascension process. And therefore, part of the experience will become accessible again. However, this will take some time and maybe sometimes takes too much time. While to a mystic, to a meditator that has a high level of practice, they remember, for example, their Atlantean lives, they remember their Egyptian lives, they remember the cataclysms, the catastrophes, and they also remember why these cataclysms and catastrophes occurred. Now scientists try to piece together our actual history that has been lost, that everything that happened before the Great Flood started destroying these civilizations, that the actual mystical knowledge was lost, that our soul memory was lost, our memory as a whole, let's say, human society was lost. And now just slowly we're piecing it back together. The reason it is so important, because the pitfalls of these other civilizations that ended in cataclysms are still there. And right now the Western mind or the Western society is completely unaware of the fact that they are the reincarnation of the Atlantean culture. And like the Atlanteans, they are messing with the same things that they shouldn't be messing with. Genetic engineering, transhumanism, certain powers that should not be controlled by the few. The idea that spiritual ascension can be done via technology, or that we can, through cybernetics and augmentation, evolve ourselves, when it is actually properly done through yogic practices that connect us to God, where we then get the proper coding from a much higher level of energy. So the pitfalls are there. The Atlantean narcissism that is now manifested as the Western intellect is still operating. The damage is not relieved. It's not undone, even though great effort was made, for example, through many Buddhist teachers who actually have an antidote to this form of transhumanism and to this ego manifestation. So their practices that actually undoes the Atlantean damage. This is why Buddha established the Buddhist system, a certain system of yoga, because it would heal the trauma of Atlantis. However, even those systems themselves are under corruption right now, because you see some teachers get publicly injected on TV with transhumanist agents. So there's a great deal of confusion for many people because they do not remember their past lives and they just see that everything is changing at an accelerated rate. In change itself is not good or bad. It is simply a question, is the change going to lead to a stabilization of civilization And are we going to come together under the proper values and laws that are of a divine nature? Or are we going to fall into the egoic state as the Atlanteans did and start abusing divine law by doing genetic experiments, by using technology that will lead to the experience of enslaving a certain part of the population and so on? So these are big questions. And this is why the ancients, for example, the great Atlantean teacher, Master Thoth, in his wisdom, he went to Egypt because he knew Atlantis was going to fall, and he understood that Egypt was the next civilization to rise at the time. So they would infuse the Egyptians with the Atlantean knowledge in order to let the mystical, the spiritual knowledge, the ways of connecting to God, to make that survive. And they put a great effort into it, especially in encoding this in the pyramids. The pyramids were used for initiation. They had many functions, but one of them was, for example, if a priest would be initiated, he would sit in the middle of the pyramid where the energy rises to the center of it, to the pinnacle, and it will trigger the Kundalini. This was part of their yogic exercises at the time that they would do in order to get into divine contact. However, this is only a tiny part of these type of practices. Now, while we start rediscovering these ancient monuments and the mystical knowledge that is encoded into them, and begin through the ascension energy redeveloping our own psychic senses so we can actually decode the hieroglyphics, decode the ancient writings in such a way that we can psychically understand it because we are a frequency matched to it. Those of us who are part of that resurgence, so to speak, we will not experience a second Atlantean downfall. This is why, for example, I have come to Peru, because in the same way as some of the Atlanteans that were serving the light sought to preserve the mystical systems, I have come to Peru because deep down I know that a center of civilization will form here over the next few centuries. And we want to infuse this center of civilization with the proper mystical knowledge, so society is based on divine law and not on distortions of such. However, many people right now, because of all the political changes, the changes in technology, the arising of AI, are very confused. What is real? What choices to make? Where to go? And the reason that they are so confused, because they haven't done their proper spiritual work in their incarnations before. So their discernment is weak. While those who have done the work, they look at the situation and they see the signs of a potential falling civilizations, and they understand which areas in the world are safe, and they feel called to these areas in order to then bring about the resurrection of the proper spiritual laws with the societies that will survive certain intense events. Even though, clearly said, a repeat of the Atlantean downfall, so Atlantis 2.0, is not guaranteed. There is a probability that a catastrophe can be prevented. However, this is uncertain at this point, so preparations are already been made by those of us who remember our past lives, who have been part of these ancient traditions, to once again create sort of a Noah's Ark of mystical knowledge and infuse the societies that will survive this experience with this mystical knowledge, so humanity can evolve and progress from there. So then, in the spirit of the ancient Master Thoth, who saw the signs and responded to this timely, in the same way we like to respond to it also timely. So then, my personal mission that connects with the bigger picture is to, in the long term, found a spiritual tradition in the mountains of Peru that will be a monastic tradition. So those who want to be a part of it, they have to be monks and nuns. They have to renounce worldly attachments, because otherwise the yogic system cannot be practiced safely, and we cannot allow a certain darkness, a certain narcissism, a certain unconsciousness to enter that monastic tradition. But many of the Atlanteans who don't know that they are Atlanteans, they believe they're spiritually awakening now, but they're getting tempted by the astral realm. They're getting tempted by false teachers. They're falling into a certain type of spiritual narcissism and the spiritual gold rush where everybody tries to trump each other. But it's not about the speed with which you make experience. It's about the wisdom. It's about the stability, the inner peace that you can demonstrate when faced with mystical experiences. The majority of humans is not capable to do that. So we need to keep this tradition clean of this particular Atlantean influence. And it's kind of strange to speak about it because those who have the Atlantean memory acted out, have the same habits and behaviors, and have the same corruption and distortion in them, but are completely unconscious of the fact that this is what they're carrying. So right now it is important to create the foundation for what is coming, no matter if the experience will be one of a cataclysmic nature or if the experience will be one of a transformative nature for the Western society. We cannot wait for that outcome. We need to now lay the groundwork and build the foundation for what is to come. So many of you have had callings. You have felt you need to go to a certain part on planet Earth. You're supposed to create communities. You're supposed to learn how to farm. You're supposed to know how to create permaculture. All of these callings are now arising because it is of course of divine will that different time streams are created, that there is also a resurrection time stream or a renaissance time stream of humanity being consciously in contact with the Holy Spirit. And those who are on that time stream, it's very important that you respond to your guidance system, that you respond to your intuitive senses. If you call to a certain place, if you call to found communities, don't hesitate. Contemplate about this, my friends. Be well.